Hello, this is week 12 and ELA Deliverable going first. We're teaching poetry for the first time this week, and so this is actually going to occur on Tuesday, which will be the day before their on-demand assessment of poetry, which is going to be essentially a diagnostic because we haven't covered it all, but this is going to be just an intro, so it's not completely foreign to them when they do take their poetry on demand. So, class, welcome. Today we're going to talk about poetry. And we're going to look at our first poem of the year, a beautiful poem titled Mask, and we're going to analyze it for theme and conflict and everything that we normally look at when we look at, wonder or any other piece of literature. So what does poetry even mean? Okay? No, actually it doesn't have to rhyme. It's a common misconception, and we're used to like Dr. Seuss and that sort of poetry, but in fact, most poetry does not rhyme. Especially not contemporary poetry, meaning the poetry that we're seeing in today's world, because there's still a lot of poets out there. It's not a dying thing. Anyway, let's review theme and conflict real quick before we move into that. If I say the theme of the poem is this, it's the same as saying the theme of a book or a writing that we look at. What does theme mean again? Okay, yes, and correct. That's the main idea, like what the author's trying to tell us. It's like the message of the story, okay? And we talked about how wonder is a story of acceptance to those that are different and showing tolerance to people, even though they look different. Great. So the poem that we're going to look at is going to have a theme, just like wonder does. It won't be the same as wonder, of course, but we're going to be reading and annotating and thinking and looking for that theme. Conflict. Remind us, what is conflict? Yes. Okay. It's like a fight, okay? It doesn't have to be a fight, though. What else? What's another way of saying conflict? Paraphrase and add on. Good, okay, so it's the problem the character is dealing with. Great. If I say that there's an internal conflict, okay? Remember we talked about internal conflicts. What does that mean? Someone remind us. Okay? Yeah, great. So it has to do with making a choice and feeling conflicted about what to do. That's generally what we see with an inner conflict. And then the outer conflict we talked about in much more traditional terms of being a problem. Okay, so someone explain to us what is an outer conflict? Good. And that's generally what it is. It's having a problem with somebody or something outside of you. Okay, and I gave the illustration before of how, when Juan comes in and he doesn't have his homework, and I pick up Juan and I body slam Juan, that is an external conflict because it's with another person. Okay? And then maybe Juan is left with the internal conflict of, should I return to school, to the teacher that body slams me when I don't do my homework? That would be an inner conflict that you would have. Okay, so let's move into the poem itself, and we're going to read this probably 150 times before we actually get into answering questions about it, because that's the thing about all literature, but poetry especially, and it is so true of me. Perhaps there's people out there that can read poetry and they just get it the first time, but I'm not one of those people. For me, when I read a poem, it takes at least 10 times of reading it before I find out, I get it, what the author is saying. And I've said this before, but you get a little bit more every single time that you read something, especially a poem. Because the thing is, the poetry means something bigger than the words themselves, okay? Generally, when we read Wonder, we see Augie saying, I was nervous to go to school, and we know that he was nervous to go to school. Poetry is a little different. A lot of times poetry will say one thing, and really it means something that's much bigger and much more powerful. And so that's what we're going to be looking at with this poem itself. So this is Mask by Deb Westbury. We're first going to read this independently, and we're back. So great job reading independently. You had your 60 seconds. Now we're going to read this out loud together. So beginning here. So I'm standing back now, looking back at least. Okay, so we did that. Now you're going to read with me and follow as we always do with the snap. I'm standing back now, looking back at on all those crowded days and nights, relentlessly erupting on face and each face, voice, mannerism, meticulously chosen, and for fear that yours would be the one that slipped or didn't fit, the one the rest saw over their shoulders as they shrank away from you. Who knows what this poem means? Hands down, you don't. I know you don't. We haven't read this poem nearly enough for any of us to know what this means. We're going to keep reading. Before we read again, I want to give you more information. This poem has 3 stanzas. Okay? And this is how poetry is grouped often, and whenever we see different stanzas, notice how there's a space in between the first, the second, and the third. We can usually assume that the author is giving us a different message with each stanza. Music lyrics are very much the same, where, for instance, a rap song may have one stanza that is about growing up, and then in the next stanza it's about being famous and where the rapper is today. We'll come back to that. Anyway, before we read again, I also want to give you a little hint as to what this is about. Raise your hand if you have ever been around somebody that you feel like they're acting fake. Okay? Sure, and I don't mean that they're lying. Like, this is bigger than just saying, well, they didn't tell the truth. Like, that's not what I mean by fake. I mean, like, the way that Halloween is coming and you're going to be dressing up and assuming the persona of someone else that you're not being yourself. You're being someone else. And you see this in real life. We always see it where someone, maybe a friend of ours, is acting one way, but we know really they're the other. Maybe someone acts tough, but we know really they're nervous or scared. Maybe we ourselves can relate to that. I do that sometimes, where I act like I know what I'm doing, and I act like I'm very tough, and then really on the inside I'm kind of anxious, okay, or insecure. Let's read this now and try to find anything that leads into that idea, okay? So I'm standing back now, I'm looking back, at least on all those crowded days and nights relentlessly erupting on Facing Street. So we can tell from this that the author looking forward? Is the author thinking about what's going on right now? Or is the author looking back to something that's already happened? Yes, that's right. So this is an author that's thinking about something that they've experienced. Okay. Second stanza, each face, voice, mannerism, meticulously chosen and applied for fear / there. Each face, voice, and mannerism. What is a mannerism? Great, read. A person's way of talking or moving. Okay, so our face, our voice, and the way that we talk, that we move, basically it's saying who we are. Chosen. Do we choose who we are? No. We are who we are. So what could the author possibly mean when she writes that she's looking back and she's thinking about people who choose who they are? They're acting fake. Exactly. Kind of like wearing a mask. Kind of like Halloween. All right, let's scroll down and look at the first question. And scene.